Barakallahu fikum. Is one intention to fast for the month of Ramadan sufficient, or does the fasting person have to renew their intention every day? Jazakumullahu khairan.
Barakallah fiik. This is an issue that the scholars have dealt with in Qadim al-Zaman, really from the earliest times, and have discussed. And that is the affair of what is known as Tabyit and Niyya لصيام Ramadan. Yani having the Niyya from the night, yani prior to the fast itself. And the mas'ala, the issue revolves around a narration, the hadith of Hafsa radiallahu anha, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, من لم يبيت الصيام قبل الفجر فلا صيام له. And whomsoever does not have the niyyah for siyam, the niyyah for fasting before fajr, then la siyama lahu, then there is no fast for that individual. There is no fast for that person. The narration, as the people of knowledge have mentioned, the narration speaks of and deals with the wajib fast and not the supererogatory fast. Since, as occurs in the hadith of Aisha, the supererogatory fast does not require tabyitun niyyah. It does not require having the niyyah before the fast, although that is the origin. But if a person woke up in the middle of the day and hadn't eaten and decided he wishes to complete the day fasting, he may do so. In that regard, we have the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, who mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ entered upon her on a day during the time of duha, which is the time after the rising of the sun and before zawal, yani before prior to the beginning of Salat al-Dhuhr, the time for Salat al-Dhuhr. Prophet ﷺ entered upon her during that time and in the morning and said, هل عندكم شيء? Do you have anything? That is, do you have anything to eat? And so she, radiallahu anha, said, La. He said, there isn't any food. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, thereafter, inni idam sa'im. He said, therefore, if that is the case, I am fasting. And that was after the rising of the sun, which indicates that tabyitun niyyah, as the scholars have mentioned, tabyitun niyyah, or having the niyyah from the night before, is not a necessity. It is not a necessity. Since the Prophet ﷺ had the intention to eat initially. When there was no food, he said, then I'm fasting. And so this hadith, من لم يبيت الصيام قبل الفجر, whoever does not have the niyyah for siyam before fajr, then there is no siyam for him. There is no fast for him. What is intended by way of this? Yani, is it that every night or prior to Salat al-Fajr, the person must have the intention and must make the conscientious niyyah to begin fasting tomorrow? Is that what is intended, or is it sufficient, as is the position of some of the people of knowledge, is it sufficient for them and for the individual to have the intention before the beginning of Ramadan? That is, they make the intention before the beginning of Ramadan to fast the month of Ramadan, and that is sufficient for an individual. What is most correct? And is the position of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, is the position from the contemporary scholars of the Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, is that is sufficient. That is to say, that when Ramadan is approaching, the person who knows that Ramadan is approaching, what niyyah does he have when it comes to Ramadan? He does not have the niyyah to fast 3 days, or 5 days, or 7 days of Ramadan. Rather, his intention before the beginning of Ramadan is to fast every one of the days of Ramadan. That is the origin. Therefore, to have the niyyah to fast the whole month is sufficient for the believer. Prior to, and Sheikh bin Uthaymeen highlights a point, and that is the niyyah is not, as some of the people mention, or some of the people believe, that just before Ramadan they must wake, they must prepare, and they must conscientiously concentrate upon making a niyyah for the fast for today. or even worse, as occurs with some of the ignorant ones, that they make a specific utterance of their niyyah, and they utter their niyyah for the fast tomorrow. There is no act of worship wherein the utterance of the niyyah is legislated, not even Hajj and Umrah. The statement that a person makes before he enters into Ihram is not the utterance of the niyyah. The talbiyah that he makes is not the utterance of the niyyah. It is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ before entering into Ihram, na'am. But it is not the utterance of the niyyah. There is no action wherein one utters the niyyah verbally. As Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned, أَتُعَلِّمُونَ اللَّهَ بِدِينِكُمْ? Are you teaching Allah Azza wa Jal concerning your deen? You don't believe Allah Azza wa Jal is fully aware and fully acquainted of what you intend, what you decide, and what you have in your hearts from niyyah. So the niyyah, therefore, prior to the coming of Ramadan is sufficient for the whole of Ramadan. And our scholars mentioned from the Shaykh Husaymin that one of the proofs that it is not a must that a person every single night has that niyyah before the day of Ramadan, the following day, that he must have that every single night, is that if a person were to fall asleep after breaking their fast and not wake up until after Fajr, then is it said that that day of fasting is batil, is null and void because you didn't have the niyyah? No, it is not. Because he actually did have the niyyah. Number one, he had the niyyah prior to the month of Ramadan itself. So if, for example, a person were to wake and it was the 17th day of Ramadan, the 17th day, and he did not make the niyyah just prior to Fajr, and he woke on the 17th day of Ramadan, in the middle of the day, he missed Fajr, he missed Suhoor, he woke in the middle of the day. Is it said that he had the niyyah before that fast, for that fast? Can we say that he had the niyyah to fast the 17th day of Ramadan? Yes, he did. He had the niyyah to fast the 17th day of Ramadan before Ramadan itself. When he had the niyyah to fast the day of Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, that included the 17th day that he fell asleep upon. And so the niyyah was present prior to the month itself for the 17th, 18th, 19th, and the rest of the months. And so what is most correct is that it is sufficient for a person to have the niyyah to fast before Ramadan. Secondly, when he has his suhoor every day, then that suhoor is again him having a niyyah. Yani the fact that he takes the meal of suhoor, that is him making his niyyah for tomorrow's fast. There is a scenario though that the scholars mention, and that is that a person, if he breaks his fast, yani the fast of Ramadan, because of sickness or being upon a journey, and so the consecutive nature of fasting each day in Ramadan has been broken because of sickness or being upon a journey, or a woman who has menses, for example, or who has come off premenstrual bleeding, then they renew their niyyah as they begin to embark upon their fast before that day's fast. And so now it may necessitate, it may be the case where they need to renew the niyyah, but the origin is the niyyah that they had before Ramadan, as Ramadan was approaching, was sufficient for them. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.